So we've talked about this idea of setting up your doing a preparation practice, which sets you up to do any of your practices. So it's not a bad thing to have no matter where you are in the program. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick review, and I will do this at the beginning of every session because I cannot say this enough. To recognize and honor each stage of the meditation practice is how we become successful meditators. A lot of people that do meditation practices that may not do these steps but still can reach that centered contemplative state, that's the fourth stage of meditation, they're often doing these in some way. They might not recognize them as a definitive stage, but what we're talking about is the result of brain function. So they need to be activating that brain function. So I'm going to just review this, and it's a reminder, anything less than each one of these won't alter the brain function, so it doesn't create a successful meditation practice. In the last couple weeks, we have reviewed these stages of meditation. So what we're doing in this class, we're going through each one of these stages and getting to know them in a very definitive, clear way so that we can develop that advanced meditation practice, right? We want to be able to reach that stage that goes beyond this simple act of using meditation as a break from life. We want to live our life in a meditative state. And so that's what we want to set up. So again, stage one is important. This is equivalent to phase one of the IEP program. I've mentioned that before. And this is really where we're setting up the practice. We're relaxing the mind and observing ourselves. So this is where we're checking in to make sure we're in the right state of mind to begin to meditate. So this was our focus last week. Again, there's been that daily practice. If people are doing that, again, checking in on what you notice. I love the feedback. But we did this focus last week. Again, you can go back and catch up on the weeks if you missed them. It won't mess you up or anything. This information's still great to have all the way through. Also to have something that is a great reminder as you're moving through the practices. So we have this stage one is we must relax our mind. We can't enter a centered state until we're not in a triggered state. So if we're anxious or stressed or having a bad day, we need to take a moment and bring ourselves present. So last week, that's what we covered, is setting up what I call the preparation stage of meditation. Positive sensory stimuli, getting ourselves into that place where we've taken a breath and become present, aware of where we are and if there's anything we need to relax or where we need to move from there. This week, we're going to talk a lot about stage 2, which is phase 2 of the program. The stage 2 of the meditation practice is about stimulating that prefrontal cortex, centering the mind, and observing ourselves in the space. Now, what this means is being fully present. And I talk about this, that being present, body, mind, spirit. Being present in the body, which means I'm aware. Am I tense anywhere? Is there anything I need to relax? What does it feel like to be where I'm sitting right now? So this is a body awareness moment. It's awareness of saying, I'm here right now physically. And then that would be body. Presence of the mind is, I'm not thinking about the past. I'm not thinking about the future. I am in this moment, fully engaged in where I am right now. I'm not worrying about my neighbors or my family or what's going on out in the world. Right now, I'm with me. I'm spending this time with myself. So that's presence in the body and mind. Presence in the spirit means I've shed my masks. I accept myself where I am today. I'm not pretending to be anything else or thinking that I don't live up to some level of expectation. I'm just with me, wherever I am today. So we're in that moment. Here we are. In the second stage, we're just centering. This is where our mind silences, because that's when we activate the prefrontal cortex. Our mind becomes silent. So we're not having to force silence. We're just allowing ourselves to become fully present. In the next 2 weeks, we'll cover stage 3. Again, this is where we expand the mind. Again, I say meditation's definition is active listening. So meditation exists to expand us, to move from what we don't know, to move from what we know and have been to what we don't know and have never been, right? Meditation was created to expand our consciousness and be in the essence of possibility. And then we'll move into stage 4, which is the contemplative stage of meditation, which is what the master meditators are using. This is where we allow new information to sit in our mind without having to understand it or figure it out. It's something that we will accomplish in just a few weeks. Again, people can spend years, decades, their whole life trying to master just stage 2 and becoming quiet, because we're busy trying to be in the consciousness to alter the brain function. But we know our consciousness is a byproduct of brain function. If I'm stressed, it's because I'm triggered, because my amygdala is triggered. If I'm happy, it's because of dopamine and serotonin. We know these things, but yet we're trying to make happiness cause the chemical, where it's the other way around. If we can control the brain function, then we get there quickly, because it's just a matter of the brain function. So that's what we're going to dig into. Today we're going to talk about stage 2. And what we're really going to talk about is in depth is that what does it really mean to be in that stage 1, and then how do we move into stage 2 from there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to talk about this concept of instinct versus intuition, and how to strengthen our instinctive abilities, or strengthen our intuitive abilities. So we're going to talk about what is the real difference between the two. And when we're talking about the first stages of meditation, this becomes critical, this understanding, because this understanding is helping us move beyond these limited expectations of what we've known about the brain in the past and move into something bigger. So what I want to do is, so I've talked about the stages of meditation in practice, and what I want to do is talk about them now as states of consciousness, because that's how we experience life, is what we're consciously participating in. Because the true goal of meditation is to expand the mind. What we're really doing is maturing our states of consciousness. So as we become a master meditator, we're moving from being maybe a reactive, triggered, we might have stress or depression or anger or fear, and we're maturing those states of consciousness to be more centered and grounded no matter what's happening. So this is what growth is. This is enlightenment. So this is what the master meditator's goal is to be able to be in a state of consciousness that is grounded and present in the moment, no matter what happens. So it's us no longer living at the mercy of externals. Things can happen, right? Things can happen in the world, and we can still stay centered and grounded in that. So today, what we're going to do is I'm going to introduce the first of the 2 major states of consciousness that mark the transition humans are making right now from moving beyond something that is a mere primate, right? So we're moving out of the animal consciousness and into a more advanced human consciousness. So we're not talking typical human, we're talking the full potential of humans. Most of us as humans are still living in that primal animal state because we're just still in the process of this shift. This is relatively new to who we are as a species. And so in that, let's talk about instinct. I want to begin with instinct. So today, instinct is what we're going to dig into, and we're going to dig into what those states of consciousness look like, what we have access to when we're in those states, and why it's so important to evolve ourselves. So the first thing we're going to talk about is instinct and the primal state of consciousness. Now, we understand there are 2 states of the primal consciousness. We know these as fight or flight, or the dying state. Now, the dying state is this. We often don't think of ourselves as being in a dying state when we're stressed, but we are. What's happening is we are the gazelle being chased by a tiger. And I'm going to dig into this state a little more. But this is us at risk. A lot of people right now are in an extreme state of fight or flight because the primal mechanisms are working off this two major components, safety and familiarity, and everything is changing right now. Our lives are unfamiliar to us, so that's triggering a lot of people. Also, the fact we can't connect with each other. Humans are social animals. We're not pack animals, but we are social, and that's being taken away. And then in addition to that, there are things like earthquakes that are true threats to safety. Now, we tend to believe or be taught that these are inherent, that the inherent response to threat, to that tiger chasing us, has to be fear. And this is what we're changing, but we have to mature the state of consciousness. Now, if we're doing that through traditional practices, that's arduous. That takes decades to be able to mature ourselves in just nominal ways. But understanding these states of consciousness, this is what we're doing with meditation. And so to be able to get to those more grounded states of consciousness and not need to be in a fight or flight state is such a gift, to be able to be centered and grounded through everything that's happening. It's so powerful to find out we don't need to live in that state, right? Because the majority of what's out there tells us we do. Or they give us a practice that's so hard we don't feel like we can achieve what's on the other side of it, right? And so we generally get told the only other option for us is this rest and digest, the other state of being a primate. Primates are either in fight or flight or rest and digest. And we are a primate species. So that's been our history, is that these are our two states of consciousness, right? We're either being chased by that tiger and dying, or we're not being chased by the tiger at the moment, so we're surviving, right? The tiger's not chasing me today. I talk about this all the time in the brain chemistry class about the fact that serotonin is this I'm not dying chemical, right? Because these are our two states. The tiger's either chasing me right now, or I've found a place to be safe from the tiger, so I've calmed the system. And then we're taught calm is good enough. That if we can just get to rest and digest, that's good enough. Now, it feels like it because most of us live in a triggered state most of the time. We're living under low-level stress. So we're living in this low-level fight or flight state all the time. And the truth is, not dying feels better than dying. That's true. But it's not the best we can feel. It's not the optimal. This is very much, again, just stage one of meditation is moving from fight or flight to rest and digest is stage one. We want to be able to move beyond. We do, but we do need to calm the system first. We need to break away from the tiger for a moment. The tiger will still exist out there at stage one if we don't move beyond stage one. But we want to be in that space where I'm calm. Okay, the tiger can't get me in this moment. Right? And so within stage one, I talked about this a little bit last week, right? This is phase one of the program as well. We're relaxing the mind and we're observing the self. But what we're observing here, all we're observing is our current state of consciousness and deciding what it will take to be calm. So stage one of the meditation practice that we practiced this week was very much, how do I just take enough of the edge off that I can move to stage two? That's all I care about. A lot of meditation practices, it's stopping and taking a deep breath, right? I talk about the sensory triggers. So we go through, and this is what we want to master first. So, and it only takes a week. Again, I'm telling you, reach master meditator state, be able to reach that state of consciousness in 1 month, in 30 days. So take time to spend that first week, because if you don't get stage one locked down, the next stages are going to be more difficult. So the way I have the program set up is you watch video one, and then there are 7 days of practices. And then you watch video 2 and there are 7 more. You don't need to rush it because you're already shedding decades from your practice. So be willing to vest each day. Again, I say 20 minutes a day. That's all you need. So in this state, we're always beginning, stage 1 is about always beginning our practice with a preparation practice. So before we try to meditate, we prepare to meditate. And that preparation is calming the system enough that we can move into stage 2. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to delve deeper into the stage 1 transition before we embark on a stage 2 practice today. So what I'll be doing is introducing that stage 2 practice today. And then what we'll do is all week, the 7 days, we'll be doing the 7 days will be doing the stage 2 practices. So we did stage 1 all this week. This next week we'll do stage 2. But what I'm going to do here is dig in to that, to what we're transitioning and why stage 1 is so important. Probably the lion's share of programs out there, I'd say at least 70% of the programs out there are just teaching this. Coping mechanisms, ways to calm the system and get back into rest and digest. What we're going to do as we move forward is move beyond rest and digest. But first, we have to be good at this one. So we're going to start by talking about fight or flight and the state of consciousness that we exist in when we're in a fight or flight trigger, right? This is a primal mechanism. So the first thing I want to tell you is that if you've ever judged yourself for being reactive, for getting angry, for getting depressed, or triggering, we tend to judge ourselves for our negative reactive behavior. But I want to tell you right now, those are stored neurons in your brain that aren't your fault, right? And I'm going to talk about why that is. But that reaction is run by the 83 billion neurons in your subconscious mind. Your conscious mind is only 3 billion. I talk about it all the time, and this is what you're going to learn in depth in this class, is that the conscious mind can't possibly control the subconscious. It learns everything last. But the subconscious mind has genius. This is where our epiphanies come from, our geniuses come from. And so we want to teach the conscious mind to allow the subconscious mind to advance us forward. But when we're in this primal we're in a primal triggered state of fight or flight, we can't control that. The prefrontal cortex shuts off. And we don't have the ability to pull ourselves out. So wherever you've been reactive, wherever that's happened, don't judge yourself. That is neurons. It is reaction according to training. And what's happening here is the brain is in a dying state. It's being chased by a tiger. Now, whether your tiger is finances or relationship issues, if you're having problems with your health or feeling successful, to your brain, it's a tiger. It's as serious as if a real tiger was outside your door. I mean, think of that. Imagine a tiger pacing outside of your house right now. That's what these experiences are to us. So of course we're stressed, right? And it's said all the time, we all have our tigers. But what we need to understand is that when we advance our brain function, we don't all need to have a fight or flight response to our tigers. We don't need to respond in fear or anger, but we first have to train the brain into that mechanism. That's why we're here, right? To change how we react to the tiger. But we can't do that from the conscious. We can do it from the conscious mind. We will not technically, but it feels like we can. It feels like we can have an effect by controlling our thoughts, controlling our feelings, but we really can't. The subconscious mind makes those decisions. So to change the mechanism is far more powerful. That's why it works so quickly, right? But this is our instinct. This is what instinct is. It's an immediate reaction according to training to the brain perceiving a dying state. If we don't have enough money or can't live up to the expectations we have of ourselves in our work life or in our relationships, if we don't feel that success, our brain is instantly triggering that. And it's an instinctive reaction based off of certain sources of information in the brain. And this is what I really want to cover here. I want to talk about these sources. is this is what's most important. We tend to think we should be able to get ourselves out of our triggered states. And we're talking about states of consciousness here. But the information we are able to access when we're triggered into certain brain function is limited or expansive depending on the brain function. So we're often taught that we only use 10% of our brain. That's inaccurate. We use 100% of our brain, but we can only use 10% at a time. The body only produces enough electricity to trigger 10%, enough electricity to trigger 10% of the brain at a time, unless there's an electrical issue, about like something like seizures, things like that. I cover that in Introduction to Brain Chemistry, also a free class. I won't get into that here. But this is all about what part of the brain am I using. So when we're in a triggered fight or flight stage, the 10% we're using when we're stressed or sad or angry or any other level of thinking, anything that we would define as negative. So, or it's what I call, instead, I don't call it negative or positive. What I call it, what Buddha called it, is suffering. This is a suffering state. We're angry when we're fearful, when we're depressed, we're suffering, right? But anytime we're in that state, there's a certain 10% of the brain we're using. And we're talking about what information is available here. So we know that the amygdala shuts off the prefrontal cortex. This is common knowledge. When we trigger fight or flight, which is the amygdala activating, it shuts off the prefrontal cortex and we go into a reaction according to training. So what does this mean? Reaction according to training means our brain is only accessing proven theory, what's worked in the past, right? It's accessing the known universe, right? Its limitations, confirmation bias. I talk in some of the more advanced classes about confirmation bias a lot, right? This is the limitation of the brain that says if it doesn't fit in with my rules of safety, I'm not even acknowledging it exists. And we don't know it. The conscious mind never knows what it's missing out on, right? We talk about that a lot, is that we have these limitations of perspective. The other thing it's accessing is current conditions. So the brain, that's all it will access during this time because it needs to respond quickly. Again, the subconscious mind is the supercomputer of our brain. It is far more efficient than the conscious mind. I often use the example of walking with a glass of water that's too full. If you look at the direction you're walking and walk, you won't spill that water. If you watch the water and try not to spill it, you're going to spill it. Because the conscious mind is not as adept at balance, at adjustments to balance. Our subconscious mind is keeping us upright all day long, right? I talked about that, I think, in the last session or the one before. But our subconscious mind is super adept. And so what's done is shut off new information because it says now's not a time to learn. A tiger is chasing you. So I'm going to go with what's worked in the past. I'm just going to have a knee-jerk reaction. And it may not be the best thing in this situation because the primal brain is not adjusted to our new way of living. So what it's going to do is it's going to do the knee-jerk reaction because it's worked for us in the past or someone in our ancestry in the past. Something has worked before to make us safe. And so the brain's just repeating it. It's just on this autopilot mode, right? And in that state, we are stuck in what we know we know. So this is what the subconscious mind knows will work. Now, when we talk about what we know, I say this represents about 1% of consciousness. It's really probably close to like 1,000th of a percent, probably way less than that, right? So when we talk about 1% of our conscious mind, and I'm not talking just total consciousness, but our consciousness, I like to use an example of language because this is a good way to paint the picture. So what I know personally. I know English. I know some Interior Salish. I know some Lakota. I know Sesame Street Spanish, and I know a few bad words in French. That's what I know, right? This is my conscious knowing. Now, within this is our knee-jerk reactions. These are our habits, good or bad. These are our dreams. I talk about this all the time. The part of the brain that dreams use are all these same things, because dreams exist to create safety. The brain goes to sleep with a problem and it tries to remedy the problem while it's sleeping. And so it's trying to find a solution to the issue. Now, I talk in depth about dreams and memory storage in advanced classes. I'm not going to get into it here because I just don't have time. But let's just say, use your dreams to understand where you are today, not where you're going, and you'll get there faster. Dreams are just telling us where we are. This is stage 1 of meditation. This is what's available in that moment. So you can see how all we can really do is calm the system. If meditation is about expansion of consciousness, we don't have access to the part of the brain that expands consciousness. So trying to meditate when we're stressed won't work. And this is why so many people struggle with meditation, because they're missing this first integral step of calming the system, right? And that's why most meditations begin with take a deep breath. Right? Why are we accessing? Why are we doing this if it's so difficult and struggles? The brain is doing it to create safety. Again, not dying is better than dying. And the brain thinks it's dying. It thinks we're going to die if we don't make a change, right? Social survival, our position in society, the money, all of that we think of as resource. We think of it as sustenance, and the brain thinks we're going to lose it, then it's going to try to survive. It's trying to relieve the suffering created by being chased by a tiger, right? It's a primal reaction according to training, stimulated by the unconscious mind, right? Again, we're not going to try and program our unconscious mind with the conscious mind. This has kept us and our ancestors alive in the past. What this generally does, so the reason why we do it is, primates are the weakest of all predators. So all animals have this fight or flight reaction, but primates are weak, and humans are the weakest of all primates. But what primates learned is that they could reason through problems. So with primates being so weak, think of monkeys in trees. They have a threat. What they've learned is if they throw things, the threat may leave, right? So that's why monkeys throw things, because they've reasoned through. So because they're weaker physically than other predators, they're now going to use their intellect to solve the problem. And their intellect taught them, wow, if I throw this, the tiger goes away because he doesn't like me throwing things at him. So monkeys throw things at everything, right? That's the knee-jerk reaction that says it's kept our ancestors alive. And so our brain is using, a lot of what it's using isn't even ours. It's what we adopted. And it kept somebody alive at some point, even if it was 10,000 years ago. And once we figure out the answer, right, we have the epiphany. If we get it, we move on and start doing something else. We've all done that. We don't do what we did when we were 10. We've all evolved, but we expect it to be this really slow journey that takes all this effort, and it doesn't need to be. Meditation exists to accelerate learning, to accelerate that learning process, to move us into those centered, more calm states faster. Right? So our learning curve is improved here, and we get to move past the confirmation biases of the amygdala. We need to shut it down. So actually what I teach people in my program is how to shrink the amygdala. Because if you shrink the amygdala, then it's not as reactive. Right? We need to weaken that muscle. That muscle's strong because of our ancestries, not because we're a failure. The brain has done this to protect us, and now it needs to work in a different way, because being monkeys and throwing things at each other doesn't work with 7.5 billion people on the planet, right? It interferes with growth now. So this is stage 1, is that ability to move out of that fight or flight state into the rest and digest state, right? That's our goal with stage 1. I want to talk about this primal state of rest and digest because that's our goal in stage 1, is we're moving from one to the other. So in the primal state of rest and digest, we're not reactive anymore. We're now in an interactive state of the brain. We're in the thinking brain, right? Rest and digest is the thinking, the analytical. This is when monkeys figured out to throw things. It's when we created the will. It's when we learned fire, right? When somebody went, wait, that lightning caused fire. Maybe I could use that fire. And then we eventually learned how to recreate what lightning did. And we learned how to build our own caves that we call houses. We learned all of these progressions while we weren't being chased by tigers, right? Where there's no way we progress while a tiger's chasing it. Prefrontal cortex is shut off because we're not going to start contemplating how to solve problems at that point when we're in that state, right? So we're no longer reactive. We're in the interactive part of our brain. And in this ability now to not just take in information and react. So animals that don't have this ability, like dogs, for example, my dog, if someone comes to the door, he doesn't contemplate, what should I do? No, his training before he came to me was freak out and attack the door, right? I'm training him something different. But he has that reaction according to his initial training is he has a fear response and attacks the door without thinking about it. What primates can do is take in this information. Oh, someone's at the door. Take in the next bit of information, combine those, and create new information. This is what we're doing when we're analyzing or thinking, right? But we're doing it as in that surviving state, right? This is, again, as monkeys, how we learned to stay. Well, we weren't monkeys, but primates as a whole, all the different species of primates. This is how we learn to stay safe, to move into reason. So instead of instinct now, we're in reason. We're analytical. This is what monkey mind is this analytical spinning of information. It's problem solving, but problem solving is only advantageous if you have a problem, right? You can be a great problem solver, but it means you have a problem. And if you have a problem, that's a triggered state. So it's just that bounce back and forth between fight or flight and rest and digest. Here's the most important thing to know about rest and digest. The source of information that you have available to you when you're in this state versus fight or flight is relatively the same, right? We've talked about the 10% before. And so what is our source of information here? It's the same. It's family history. It's our DNA. It's the neurons we adopted from our parents and the ancestral lines. You look at fear, things like spiders, snakes, social anxiety. Most of those are adopted fears through neurons. If you show any primate that's never seen a snake before, a snake, they're going to freak out because snakes are a major predator of primates. That's why. Why are we afraid of spiders, right? Because ancestrally, many of those spiders could kill us with a single bite. We're far more tolerant now. There are still spiders that are threatening, but that's programmed. That's programmed into who we are, right? Like with any predator, we all have these instinctive fears of tigers. If we see a tiger, a shark, I remember going to a shark tank in Houston, Texas, where you're underneath them. It freaked me out. I'd never been around a shark before. I grew up inland and having that great white swim around instantly triggered fear. Now, I had no experience with sharks that meant I should be afraid of them, but there was something about those eyes that just instantly triggered me. It's like that with any predator, right? So we get these neurons, we adopt them, and then we have personal experience, which is our upbringing, our education, and this is how we use the neurons. So we adopt all these neurons from ancestors, and now we wire them in whatever way helps us survive our childhood, right? Because it's all this information coming in telling me these are the rules of survival. That's why your rules of survival are ingrained. If you're wondering about having habits that you can't just get rid of, the reason why is they're ingrained because your brain was taught that you needed those things to survive. If you didn't do them, you were going to die. right? And then our environment is the third part of the brain that's being accessed. This is exactly what's being accessed when we dream. And it's the same thing that when we're doing an analytical learning process, when we're processing information, analyzing. I always talk about this. The brain's doing one of two things, observing or processing information. We'll talk about observing later, but it's in a processing stage, right? It's processing information. But to change the neuron, the therapeutic process, this is growth, and it's arduous, and it's incremental. The big difference between accessing this information from the interactive thinking state is reason. Fight or flight, there's no learning. So fight or flight's not analyzing anything, it's just reacting. When we move into rest and digest, now we can make comparisons and start to analyze things. It does create opportunity, but it also puts us in monkey mind. It puts us as being over analytical, at trying to figure everything out. So there are limitations to that. So again, we talk about fight or flight is what we know we know. This is what we know we don't know. This is where we expand our knowing, right? And access additional information, right? So what we know we don't know, I add up to be the other 10. So I say between what we know and what we know we don't know, it's about 10% of our consciousness. So if I use language as an example again here, I am going to use the example that I know I don't know Swahili. I know I don't know any Japanese or Chinese dialects. I know I don't know the rest of French or Spanish. I know I don't know German. What I know I don't know is significantly larger than what I know, right? And we do have access to this in this, that we don't in fight or flight. We know what we don't know, right? This is where we can use rational thought, conversations to learn from others. We can study. This is stage 2, should say stage 2, I was modifying that. This is stage 2 of meditation practice, right? This is where we measure all we know against all we don't know. We analyze what's beneficial to the moment, but it's only beneficial to the extent that we have the information or access to the information, right? It's beneficial until we need access beyond what's available around us. We're bound to that access. So if I need a solution that nobody I know knows, I'm stuck. I have to learn it. Again, it's going to take me time. It's going to take resources. It does make it longer. It worked really well when we didn't have 7.5 billion people on the planet. Things weren't moving so fast, and we don't go through all these major shifts in what we're going beyond. I'll talk about that more. But we want to talk about why are we accessing it? Well, what we're doing is we're using it to become more centered. That's our purpose of triggering ourselves out of this part of the brain. So when we're in our life, most of the time we're bouncing between fight or flight and rest and digest. What we're doing now is we're using it because now we've calmed the system, so we're conscious enough to make a choice, and we're choosing to stimulate the prefrontal cortex now, to not settle for rest and digest, to become more mature, right? We're using the 3 billion neurons to stimulate a different reaction in the brain. And we can't do that by training the brain through this arduous method of interactive thinking. We need to do it by changing the brain function. So that's what we're doing in stage 2. So we understand now what we're moving out of. So next week, I'm going to get deeper into stage 2. Next week, we're going to really dig in to what we're stimulating. So the way I just went through fight or flight and rest and digest, I'm going to talk about the prefrontal cortex and how it's different than primates and what humans can do in that are triggered by the stage 2 practices. So I'm going to do that, but I want to give you a stage 2 practice for today. So we're going to do a really quick meditation, and then there will be the daily practices in the class that you can continue. And I'm going to give us 5-minute meditation practice. That is stage 2 of meditation. And what we're doing now is we're using that state we've established by calming the system, the practice we learned last week, and now we're becoming centered and in the moment. So what I'm going to give you is a quick centering practice, and throughout the week I will dig deeper into centering. So a quick centering practice is, again, I mentioned becoming aware of yourself in the space, but being able to utilize that to focus. So one of the practices I teach is a body scan, but I'm going to take that into a sensory awareness of our space. So what we do when we do this is we've taken that time to calm the system, to breathe deeply, to become present, to light a candle we like the smell of, or put on some music, or the sound of water or rain, just to calm our system. And then when the system is calm, we become aware of where we are sitting. We've already checked in and said, how relaxed are my muscles? Maybe how deep is my breathing? We've done that in the first stage. Now to do stage 2, what we're doing is becoming more aware of what we may not have noticed before. The key to triggering the prefrontal cortex is observation. Mindfulness is simply observation. So we start to observe our sensory experience. So take a moment and observe the space around you. If you can see, we'll begin with a sight practice, but we'll be moving into other practices if anybody has any of the senses that they don't experience in the way the rest of us do. If you have your eyes closed, be aware of whether or not you see anything on the back of your eyelids. If you have limited sight, what can you see? What do you notice? Are there colors? Are there varying patterns of gray? What about full sight? What colors are in the room around you? What is the shape? Are you outside or inside? How do you like your space to fill? Do you like it open? Are you minimalist, that you like not a lot of information around you? Or do you prefer an environment that has objects of comfort and familiarity or inspiration? What sounds are you hearing right now? There's the sound of my voice. Are there any other sounds where you are? Sounds from nature? We all have a constant sound our ears are processing. If we have hearing, and some of us might hear it as a ringing, or we might hear static or a buzzing noise, might hear a low hum. And what we hear changes. What can you hear right now? Is there anything in the room you weren't hearing before? Like the ticking of a clock? Or sometimes even your own breath? the movement of other people in the space. Again, our centered state is observation. This is what we're going to be practicing this week, is being aware of what it is to be in a state of observation. Taste, smell. Is there a scent where you are, or a flavor on your tongue? What about touch? What is the temperature and the texture of the room where you are? Is it comfortable? Is it warm? Is it cool? Is it neutral? What is your experience? I'd like you to spend a little bit of time. I recommend 20 minutes and letting today be your practice. But doing 20 minutes of writing, observing the space you're in. Try going outside and observing nature. Or observe your house. Notice things you might not have noticed before. And describe them. Next week, I'm going to go ahead and talk about what it means to articulate. But for now, just observe and describe it the best you can. And I will look forward to seeing everyone next week for the 4th session. And again, if you have any questions online while you're doing the class, just go ahead and contact me on social media, and I will, I'm happy to help in whatever way I can. So good luck with your practice, and I hope everyone has a beautiful evening.